Hello, my name is Dawn Thibodeau. I'm the Global Regulatory Affairs Principal at TÜV SÜD for our MDSAP program. I'm joined today by our colleague, Sophia, who I'll let introduce herself in a moment. And we're here today to talk to you about FDA's new QMSR and the alignment with ISO 1345. Sophia?
Yep. Thank you, Dawn. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Sophia Epstein-Elbrus, and we will be presenting today with Dawn. We will talk a little bit about the QMSR and our perspective as TÜV SÜD. Before we jump in, I would like to gauge the audience a little bit. So we prepared just a small poll to try and understand how familiar you are with the FDA regulations and with the MDSAP program and with ISO 13485. So if we can go ahead and share the poll, I think you should see it on your screens.
We'll just give you a couple seconds to go ahead and answer the poll right now before we move on in just a few moments.
Yep. And I guess maybe while that is happening, a couple more folks will join in. Okay. Yeah, maybe another 30 seconds to a minute. Okay, let's maybe wrap it up. Thank you so much. Okay, very good. So let's see what we have. QMS is only compliant with the FDA, about 10%. QMS is QSR compliant and ISO 13485 certified. Very good. That would be very helpful. And then we have about 40% that hold already an MDSAP certification that includes the US regulations. So I think that would be very, you guys are in a very good shape, prepared to what's coming. So perfect. So Don, I'll hand it back to you, maybe just in a few words, just summarize what we're going to be talking about today and introduce.
Sure. So today's webinar is broken down into 3 different topics. And as Sophia said, we are really providing you our perspective as a recognized auditing organization when we talk to these topics. So we'll first start with a little introduction to the QMSR. Then we'll go into some compliance. And before we wrap it up, we'll talk a little bit about the QMSR and MDSAP and then open it to question and answers for you guys. To kick things off and give you an introduction to the QMSR, the final rule was published amending the device current good manufacturing practice requirements under the Code of Federal Regulation Part 820, which was established back in 1996, so a little bit ago. And this now replaces most of the existing regulation with an incorporation by reference to ISO 1345-2016. So what does this mean? This means that 1345 is now the baseline of the regulation. Within the new regulation, Part 820.3 also incorporates by reference clauses of ISO 9000-2015, which contains the terms and definitions necessary for application of 1345. Now, the QMSR does still retain the scope and some definition from the original QSR. Terms such as implantable medical device, manufacturer, remanufacturer, those are retained. And that is because either 1345, their definition does not align with the FDA's definition, or 1345 doesn't even really define some of the terms. So that is why they're retaining that. Why did the FDA decide to make this change? Regulatory expectations for a quality management system have evolved since 1996. Requirements between the current Part 820 and ISO 1345 2016, the FDA found that they were substantively similar to one another. And so by making this change, it allows for simplified compliance for companies such as yours to do business globally. This aligns the US more closely with many other regulatory authorities around the world, who a lot of which already use 1345 in their regulatory system. As I mentioned, the new QMSR does replace a lot of the existing regulation. However, it does still retain some requirements from the original QSR. And those parts that are retained include those about device labeling, the unique device identification, and complaint handling as just a few examples. So, Sophie, can you elaborate now more about the QMSR and its alignment with 1345?
Absolutely. And this was actually a long-awaited change by the industry. And here you can see a table that basically demonstrates in a way the thought process through which the regulators went through. And this is very detailed, described in quite great details on the FDA webpage. After the presentation will be done, our colleagues from TÜV SÜD will share with you a few helpful links that I would really encourage you to review, because it provides a lot of history and background on how the decision was made. So on the left-hand side, you can see the existing quality system regulation. And then on the middle, you can see the ISO 13485 clauses. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the final rule, the QMSR. So already the content of the quality management system requirements in many cases was pretty much substantially identical. There were a few critical points that were specific to the US FDA that clearly we need to still comply with, and the regulators knew that they need to retain. So although the majority of ISO 13485 clauses are referenced within the new QMSR, we do still have some of those additional requirements, as they are marked here in green, that will be embedded specifically within the new QMSR itself, as available on the FDA website. So this was the first step. The regulators reviewed the requirements. They came up with this finalized quality management system regulation. And if we just go to the next slide, if possible, thank you. This is our bottom line QMSR structure as it is available today. So you can see that, yes, we have the scope, we have the definitions like Don mentioned, also referencing ISO 9000. And then we have 820.6 that incorporates by reference ISO 13485 clauses. When they say incorporate by reference, what it means, amongst other things, is there is not a duplication of the ISO 13485 verbiage now copied into the US regulations. Really, those clauses verbatim are pointing us to ISO 13485 standard. For ISO 13485 standard is generally a standard that is supposed to be paid for. However, there is an option to view a view-only copy. On ANSI portal. It is ANSI IBR portal. And again, we will share the link with you in case you will need to access that. Now, in addition to the ISO 13485, we have those additional requirements, those requirements that have already existed within the quality systems regulation and are not explicitly documented in 13485. And those supplementary provision sections have been embedded specifically within the regulation itself. And then you have this 82035 talking about control of records, and 82045 talking about device labeling and packaging control. And those would be defined and documented within the final rule. We have a couple examples of those additional supplementary provisions just to help gauge a little bit better where we currently stand with that. Okay, so we have the quality management systems and supplementary provision clauses here. So the first one is 820.10, and it's the requirements for quality management system. Here, we do not explicitly have additional requirements documented, but what we have in 820.10 is a link between ISO 13485 clauses and what do they mean in the context of the compliance with the specific regulation of the US FDA. So, for example, you have the clause 758 of ISO 13485 that talks about identification, and this is linked to the unique device identification requirements. Then we have medical device reporting, corrections and removals, so field actions. Those of you familiar with ISO 13485 know well that there are clauses within ISO 13485 that provide that working framework for those items as well. So you have clause 723, you have clause 823 and 833. So if you follow the ISO 13485 requirements while addressing those additional FDA CFRs that talk about reporting requirements and field actions, you will basically be able to demonstrate compliance as documented here. And then, of course, for high-risk devices, implantables, and life-supporting devices, you have the tracking requirement, which is, again, a separate CFR under the FDA rule, and it is linked to Section 7592 of ISO 13485. And those, again, are non-all-inclusive examples that you can find on the FDA webpage. But this is just to give you this initial understanding of how the structure works and what this embedded by reference means. Now, then this is the quality management systems portion, and then we move into the supplementary provisions portion. Those are those add-on requirements, and they are currently documented in 82035 and 82045. So again, a couple of examples. 35 talks about control of records. ISO 13485 has quite a lot of specific requirements related to control of records. However, there are additional expectations that are communicated to us by the FDA regulators. And those, again, are specifically addressed within the QMSR. For example, we're talking about complaint and service records, UDI, confidentiality. Some of those more detailed examples you will see include clear definition of mandatory content of your complaint files, It is very similar to the expectations that were already available under the quality system regulation. You will have description of mandatory content of service records. Again, very similar to what currently already is available. Then there's a requirement to make confidential records available to the regulators explicitly marked as such. This is in order to allow the FDA regulators to support the Public Information Act regulation. So those are some specific, very defined, very well-defined requirements, and they are available to the public by the regulators. Then the next example would be 82045, device labeling and packaging controls. This is also very structured. If you will see 82045, it talks about label and packaging content review, release of labeling for use, prevention of mix-up of material, and they define at what steps throughout the product realization process those reviews are required, what types of QC checks are expected to be implemented, and they take an additional step above what's currently documented in 13485. 13485, as of course you all know, is a general quality management system standard. This is the baseline that is currently used pretty much as the basis for medical devices quality management system establishment worldwide. So those requirements are quite generic because there are additional expectations within the US FDA. Those are currently documented in addition to the existing ISO 13485. This is it. And this slide is really here to demonstrate really how much substantially equivalent those two requirements currently are. It's really quite minimal compared to ISO 13485. It is really substantially equivalent to the existing quality system regulation. Therefore, the hope is that this transition, although is critical and it is a significant step to the medical device industry, is supposed to be seamless if you, and it's been around already coming up on 2 years, the expectation is for this transition to be fairly seamless. Now, if we go to the next slide, we will talk a little bit about that. So in that same link that we will share with you at the end of the presentation, there is a questions and answers that were submitted by the public to the FDA when the rule was initially published. And there's a lot of responses, I think close to 80 questions and answers. And one of the questions was, what can we as the industry do to prepare for the transition? And the response that is provided by the regulators is, in order to prepare for compliance, you need to ensure that your quality management system meets the requirements of the regulation. So very simple and pretty straightforward. However, we just want to talk about it a little bit more specifically. Of course, taking into account that each quality management system is different, each company's structure is different. We need to make sure that everybody is performing the activities that make sense for your organization to achieve compliance. But the full compliance is expected starting February 2nd. This is very clear. There's not going to be, at this point, any expectation for an extension or a change. Starting February 2nd, all MDSAP auditing organizations and all FDA inspections will be performed against the final rule, against the QMSR. So by that date, the expectation is for the industry to complete fully the transition and be ready, be compliant. Now, it's not the first time medical device regulations are changing, and typically what what we've experienced, what is considered the best practice when new regulations are released, is some type of performance of gap assessment against what is currently existing at within the quality management system. Training of personnel to make sure that if there are impacted people within the organization, they are familiar. Awareness training just to make sure that people understand that change have been made if it is applicable to their role. And surely review of documents and records, internal audit performance to verify compliance is something that has been known to be working in certain cases. Verification of pointers to the regulation within the internal documentation system, and so on. Those are just some examples, definitely not all inclusive, definitely not something that is mandatory, just some type of experience that we've been seeing throughout similar transitions that can potentially help gauge where the quality management system is compared to the requirements. Of course, goes without saying, each manufacturer must follow their internal processes for regulatory changes to ensure compliance. The bottom line is we need to be able to demonstrate through traceable records that the quality management system starting February is fully compliant with the requirements of the final rule of the QMSR. In this slide, I have specifically outlined points 11 and 12 of the Q&A on the FDA webpage. Again, the link will be shared with the participants. I highly encourage everyone not just to look at those 2 points, but go through the Q&A. There are a lot of very good questions that were raised by the public throughout the transition, and FDA provided kindly very detailed responses. Some of the comments were accepted, some of the comments were refused, however, with very detailed justification. Let's see. Yeah, and again, the expectation is clear, typical steps are defined. However, depending on the structure of the quality management system of each individual company, you need to assess where you stand right now. We don't really have much time, so the hope is that by now you already have made certain steps to ensure that you are compliant. But if not, again, the transition shall be fairly simple because of the similarities between the existing system expectations and the new system expectations. So I think at this point, maybe we can talk a little bit about how the MDSAP program can help out. Again, as we've seen, there was about 40 plus participants that already are part of the MDSAP program. Again, for those, it shall be much simpler. And Dawn, maybe you can provide a bit more detail about that piece.
Sure. So when it comes to MDSAP, it really is complementary to the change that's occurring. MDSAP is based on 1345-2016. So when auditing organizations come in and perform an audit, an MDSAP audit, we are auditing against the clauses of 1345 and then, of course, the additional country-specific regulations. And the MDSAP program has been running successfully now for many years, and this lends confidence to the FDA's decision to updating to the QMSR. There's one thing that we don't know right now, and that is the impact to the MDSAP audit approach. If you have been part of the MDSAP program from the beginning or early on, you might know that originally the MDSAP audit approach was known as the companion document. And the companion document, that really is what the approach is. It is a guidance or companion for the auditing organizations when we are auditing your companies, that we kind of follow it. It helps us along, but we really, again, are auditing to 1345 in the regulations. So even though we don't know how the audit approach might be impacted, the compliance is against the regulation in 1345. The FDA has stated that they will not be issuing ISO 1345 certificates when they go in and they perform inspections of your company under the new QMSR. And similarly, they are not going to also require that you have an ISO 1345 certificate. So if you are not certified under MDSAP, or if you are not certified to 1345 by a registrar, the FDA is not going to require that. Lastly, the FDA will not accept ISO 1345 certificates as evidence of compliance to the QMSR. So that means that if you are 1345 certified by a registrar or a notified body or under MDSAP, it's not going to exempt you from the FDA inspection under the QMSR. Having said that, though, having an ISO 1345 certificate and your QMS, your quality management system certified to ISO 1345, that can give you a good baseline understanding of how your quality management system is doing against the QMSR. I know that was just a little tiny snippet about MDSAP and the QMSR, but again, it is not majorly impacted, as Sophia was just explaining to you. And we are ready now to open this up and allow you to ask us some questions and provide some answers to you.